a spineless fraud. You're a cancer to this legacy." The patriarch's booming voice sliced through the exclusive New England art gallery, his hand striking the black male protagonist's face with a brutal crack that silenced the mingling elite. Unbowed, the renowned art curator, founder of Boston's most cutting-edge gallery, merely chuckled softly. "Legacy? Seems I'm no kin to this charade," he retorted, then turned and strode away. For years he'd endured his in-laws' sneers, excluded from their private auctions, his work mocked as mere decor, his heritage dismissed. Yet tonight, his defiance sparked a reckoning. Would his bold stand shatter a dynasty's facade, or was there more to this gilded cage than met the eye? The gallery's pristine white walls, usually a canvas for quiet contemplation, now echoed with the fallout of the public slap. Caleb Thorne, in his impeccably tailored charcoal suit, felt the sting but held his gaze steady on Richard Sterling, his father-in-law, a titan of the Boston art world. Richard, a white man whose wealth was as old as the city itself, glared, his face mottled with fury. This was the Sterling Collection's Centennial Gala, an event Caleb had meticulously orchestrated. But his chair at the head table, alongside the Sterling family's priceless heirlooms, was conspicuously absent. The guests, a mix of old money and contemporary artists, murmured. Caleb's husband, Sarah Sterling, a white woman whose silence had always been her shield, stood frozen by the grand marble fireplace, her eyes fixed on the floor. Caleb Thorne was a self-made force. He'd built Aura Gallery, from a tiny studio in a revitalized urban district into Boston's premier destination for avant-garde art, championing diverse artists and challenging traditional norms. His marriage to Sarah Sterling 4 years ago was meant to bridge worlds, but the Sterlings saw him, a black man from a working-class background, as an interloper. Eleanor Sterling, Sarah's mother, had set the tone from their first meeting, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Our family," she'd purred, "prefers consistency." Every interaction was a slight. Family holidays were for Sterling blood. Business dinners where the family discussed the future of Sterling art investments were too complex for him. At a charity gala Caleb himself had planned, Richard introduced him as Sarah's little decorator, his tone dripping with condescension. Sarah, always nearby, would offer a tight, apologetic squeeze of his hand, but never a word of defense. Caleb, who had transformed warehouses into luminous exhibition spaces and neglected gardens into sculptural havens, was constantly reminded he wasn't one of them. He'd clung to the belief that his talent and love for Sarah could soften their hearts, but tonight, the empty chair was a blatant, public declaration. The morning after the gala, the city hummed with gossip. Caleb sat in his minimalist apartment, the scent of fresh coffee doing little to calm his racing thoughts. Sarah had left early for a crisis meeting at Sterling Art Investments, her laptop left open on the kitchen island. A rare slip. A prickle of unease led Caleb to it. The screen flickered to life, revealing an open folder. Sterling Legal. His heart pounded as he clicked, uncovering a document titled Thorne Divorce Settlement. The words blurred. Undesirable union with Caleb Thorne, a paltry sum, a timeline. The announcement was planned for the Sterling's upcoming Founders' Day ball, framed as a mutual decision. His hands steadied as he scrolled, taking photos of each page with his phone. Then, a file caught his eye, a Zoom recording, time-stamped days earlier. Caleb hesitated, but curiosity, mixed with a growing fury, compelled him. He clicked. Richard's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. He's served his purpose. The ball will be the perfect stage for his graceful exit. A chorus of agreement followed. Then Sarah's voice, faint but unmistakable. "It's for the best. He'll understand. The recording cut off, leaving Caleb in a silence that roared louder than any slap. They hadn't just planned his humiliation, they'd choreographed his erasure. Caleb felt no tears, only a blazing clarity. He opened his own laptop. His years building Aura Gallery had forged an unshakable network. Now, it was his arsenal. His first call was to Miss Evelyn Reed, his gallery manager and confidant. Evelyn, pull all Aura Gallery's upcoming artists from the Founders' Day Ball. Cite unforeseen artistic conflicts. Refund deposits immediately. Evelyn, loyal and sharp, agreed without question, sensing the tremor in Caleb's calm voice. Next, he contacted Julian, a prominent art critic he'd championed. Julian, I have a story for the Boston Arts Ledger. It involves Sterling Art Investments. Major irregularities. Julian's excitement was palpable. Caleb then swiftly emailed the high-profile caterer and the vintage champagne supplier, instructing them to halt deliveries to the Sterling event. The Founders' Day Ball, meant to cement the Sterling legacy, would unravel at his command. But Caleb knew this was just the beginning. He uploaded the divorce draft photos to a secure cloud drive, then turned to Sarah's still-open email. A quick search revealed a trail of correspondence, messages between Sarah, Richard, and the family's old money accountant. They detailed more than just hidden assets. They showed Sterling Art Investments was propping up its crumbling facade by systematically devaluing and selling off pieces from its own historic collection, replacing them with convincing forgeries and funneling the real profits into offshore accounts. One email from Eleanor was chillingly blunt. Move the funds before the appraisals. The public mustn't know, and Caleb certainly mustn't. Caleb's jaw tightened. He archived everything, forwarding copies to his lawyer. He wasn't just divorcing Sarah, he was about to expose a century of lies. The Founders' Day Ball pulsed with the illusion of grandeur, but an unsettling quiet hung in the air. The grand ballroom, usually abuzz with the clinking of glasses and hushed whispers, was missing its lavish food stations and the soft strains of its usual string quartet. Caleb, impeccably dressed, stood poised, watching from the balcony as the city's elite arrived. His phone buzzed, Julian's expose. Sterling Art Investments rocked by forgery, fraud scandal, had just hit the Boston Arts Ledger front page. Richard and Eleanor Sterling, regal at the head of the main reception, froze mid-greeting, their smiles faltering as guests began to check their phones. Sarah, looking pale, scanned the thinning crowd with dawning panic. The first crack appeared when a renowned art collector frowned. "Where's the Rothko I was promised?" She muttered, loud enough to draw eyes. Others murmured, tapping their devices, the article's accusations spreading like wildfire. Eleanor signaled a server, only to find none. Her smile tightened as she rose. A minor delay, nothing more. But the absence of a five-star caterer and music betrayed her. Caleb descended the grand staircase, his presence a silent challenge. Richard's eyes widened, a flicker of raw fear. Eleanor rounded the table, her voice a furious hiss meant for him alone. "You think you can ruin us, you insolent boy?" Before Caleb could respond, Eleanor's hand lashed out, a sharp slap resounding. The room gasped, frozen in shock. Caleb's cheek burned, but he didn't flinch. His eyes, blazing with defiance, met Eleanor's. "I learned from the best, Eleanor," he said, his voice steady and resonant. "Tonight, I just exposed your masterpiece." The words hung in the air, a declaration that ripped through the room. Guests erupted in whispers, phones held aloft. Richard stepped forward, his face ashen, but Caleb's glare stopped him cold. Caleb turned and walked toward the doors, the crowd parting, their murmurs now a roar. The sting of the slap was a badge of his rebellion. He'd expected resistance, but their public unraveling was even more satisfying. Outside, the New England night was crisp. Caleb paused, steadying himself. His phone vibrated with messages. Miss Reed confirming his instructions, Julian texting, "It's blowing up. The museum's calling for comments." Caleb silenced the device. The Sterlings had scripted his exit, but he'd torn their playbook apart. The Founders' Day ball, meant to be their triumph, was now their reckoning. Behind him, the gallery lights flickered, signs of the auxiliary systems shutting down as he'd instructed. Caleb imagined the scene inside, Eleanor scrambling, Richard fielding panicked calls, Sarah hiding her face. The Boston Arts Ledger's expose would dominate headlines by morning, its details sourced from Caleb's evidence. Their empire, built on forgeries and fraud, was crumbling. Caleb slid into his sleek black car, the leather cool against his skin. As he pulled away, the gallery shrank in his rearview mirror, its glow fading like a dying star. The road stretched into the night. Caleb's mind was clear. He'd given the Sterlings his best, his talent, his loyalty, only to be cast aside. Now, he'd reclaimed his power. The slap had been their mistake, his response, his victory. He turned on the radio, a soulful jazz riff filling the car, a quiet triumph. Caleb Thorne had walked into that hall as their pawn. He'd left as their judge. 3 months later, the spring sun streamed into Caleb Thorne's new loft apartment in Boston's vibrant Seaport district. Its exposed brick and soaring windows reflected his aesthetic, raw, authentic, and forward-looking. Boxes were curated, rare art books, a vintage turntable, and sculptures by emerging artists. He sat at his custom-built desk, reviewing a contract for a high-profile international art fair in London, his pen tapping rhythmically. His phone glowed. Client inquiries, a profile request from Art Basel magazine, a confirmation for his keynote at the Global Curators Summit. Caleb's lips curved into a quiet smile. He was no longer the Sterling's outcast. He was a force reborn. Aura Gallery had surged, its reputation solidified by Caleb's integrity and daring. Clients flocked to him, drawn by his vision and the buzz of his defiance. His team, once a nimble trio, now bustled with new hires. Each deal was a brick in the empire he'd built, untainted by the Sterling shadow. Caleb's divorce from Sarah, finalized weeks ago, had been swift and uncontested. The evidence he held had ensured his terms. A news alert buzzed. Sterling Art Investments acquired by international conglomerate. Sterling family members stepped down. Richard and Eleanor, once titans, had vanished from the public eye. Their grand estate listed for sale to settle debts. Sarah had moved to a quiet coastal town, her name barely a whisper in Boston society. Caleb felt no glee, just a detached acknowledgement. Their fall was their own. His rise was his. Later that day, Caleb met Julian at a bustling bistro. Julian, now a senior editor, raised a glass. "To you, Caleb. You didn't just break a story, you broke a dynasty." Caleb clinked his glass. "To truth." He corrected. "You gave it a voice." They laughed, two men who had challenged the old god and won. Caleb packed for London, his suitcase light, unburdened by the past. The Sterling name no longer haunted him. It was a footnote fading with each step. He thought of the Global Curators Summit. His speech, Art as Liberation, was a distillation of his journey. "They defined my place," he'd written, "but I redefined my purpose." He'd speak not just for himself, but for every artist, every visionary, every person told they didn't belong. As night fell, Caleb stood on his balcony, Boston's lights a tapestry below. The city had seen his rise, his fall, and now his rebirth. He was no longer defined by the Sterling's rejection, but by his creation. The summit loomed, a chance to claim his narrative. In his place among the powerful, to speak his truth, Caleb Thorne was no one's shadow. He was the light, and he was just beginning to shine. Thank you for joining us on Caleb Thorne's unforgettable journey. What did you think of Caleb's bold stand? Did his courage inspire you, or perhaps spark memories of your own battles against injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this tale resonated with you and where you're tuning in from. Your voices make our community vibrant, so don't hold back. If you haven't already, hit subscribe to catch our next story of strength and transformation. Until then, keep claiming your space, and we'll see you soon for another story that stirs the soul. Stay bold,